I watched my daughter through the glass door of the restaurant, her section packed on a Friday night, moving between tables with that particular efficiency you only develop from months of doing it. 22 years old, second year of nursing at Dalhousie, and she still insisted on working the dinner rush 4 nights a week. I'd told her I could cover more of her tuition. She always said the same thing. I want to earn it, Dad. Her name was Wren, after her mother who loved birds, who could identify any species by its call, who died of an aneurysm when Wren was 6 years old. 16 years of the two of us. 16 years of figuring it out together in our small house in Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. My phone buzzed against the bar top. It was my brother. He never called on Friday nights. I stepped outside. "You're still coming to the shower on Sunday, right?" he said. Not hello, just that. I told him yes, of course. Wren had been looking forward to it for weeks. She'd bought a gift on her staff discount, wrapped it herself with leftover ribbon from last Christmas. There was a pause, the kind that means something is coming. "So here's the thing," he said. "Simone's been talking to her mom about the guest list." Simone was my brother's fiancée. She was 31, worked in commercial real estate, had grown up in Westmount, Montreal in a house with a name. Not a number. An actual name on a brass plate by the door. My brother Gordon had met her at a conference in Calgary 3 years ago, and within 6 months they were engaged. I had never once heard her ask Wren a single question about herself. "The shower is pretty curated," Gordon said. Her mom's friends, her college friends, women from her office. Simone was hoping it could stay professional. "You know how it is." "Wren's fam know how it," I said. "Of course she is. It's just the dynamic Simone's going for. They've booked a private room at the carriage house, and it's a specific kind of afternoon." "What kind of afternoon requires excluding my daughter?" Another pause. Longer this time. "She works in a restaurant, Michael." The way he said it. Not like it was a fact, like it was a diagnosis. "She's in nursing school," I said. "She works at the restaurant to pay for it. I know that. But Simone's colleagues don't know that. They'll just see a young woman who works for a living. You know what I mean?" I looked back through the glass. Wren was laughing at something a customer had said. She had her mother's laugh. Open, unguarded, the kind that made strangers feel like they'd said something brilliant. "We'll be there Sunday," I said, and ended the call. I didn't tell Wren. She was still riding the high of finishing her pharmacology midterm that week, texting her study group about celebrating. She asked me twice that weekend if I thought Simone would like the gift. A cashmere blanket in pale gray, expensive enough that Wren had put it on layaway and paid it off over 6 weeks. "She's going to love it," I told her both times. Sunday afternoon, we drove out to Chester, where Simone's mother, Renee, had a summer property that functioned year-round. The kind of house that appeared in magazine features about Nova Scotia's coastal architecture, all-weathered cedar and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Atlantic. The carriage house attached to it had been converted into an event space. Stone floors, reclaimed wood beams, a catering team setting up near the windows. We arrived 20 minutes early because Wren wanted to help. The parking area already had cars I didn't recognize. Ontario plates, Quebec plates, one rental from the airport. I pulled in beside a Range Rover the color of graphite. Wren carried the gift bag. She'd curled her hair that morning, borrowed a blazer from her friend down the hall, looked older and more polished than I'd seen her in months. We knocked. Renee opened the door. She was Simone's mother, down to the posture, the kind of straight-backed composure that takes decades to develop, or money, or both. Her eyes moved over us like she was appraising something she hadn't ordered. "Michael, you're early, not a welcome, an observation." "We thought we could help set up," Wren said, bright and easy. "Everything's been handled by the caterers." Renee stepped back just enough to suggest we could enter, but not far enough that it felt like an invitation. "Gordon's around somewhere, Michael. Perhaps you could find him." "Wren," she paused. Really looked at Wren for the first time. "Is that the jacket from the Marquette, the restaurant?" Wren glanced down. It wasn't. It was her friend's blazer from Winners, bottle green with brass buttons. But it didn't matter what it was. "You probably smell like the kitchen," Renee said, not unkindly. That was the terrible part. The clinical pleasantness of it. "These things linger, you know. The oils, the fryer. It clings to hair especially. Some of Simone's colleagues have sensitivities." Wren went very still. "There's a garden bench around the side," Renee continued. "The weather's reasonable today. You'd be comfortable there while the guests arrive, and once we're settled, you're absolutely welcome to come in." "She's my daughter," I said, "and I'm sure she's lovely. It's just a matter of first impressions, isn't it?" I felt Wren's hand touch my arm, light, a warning. "It's fine, Dad." Her voice was careful, practiced. "I'll wait outside." "Wren, really? It's okay. Go find Uncle Gordon." And she went, around the side of the house, gift bag still in her hand, and her friend's blazer that didn't smell like anything except laundry detergent and a faint trace of someone else's perfume. I stood there another moment. Then I did something I am not proud of. I went inside. I told myself it would be 10 minutes, 15. I would find Gordon, tell him what had happened, and he would fix it. Gordon was reasonable. Gordon had driven 8 hours from Halifax to help me move when Rebecca died, and I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. Gordon was the one who had taken Ren to her first hockey practice when I was at a job site in Moncton and couldn't leave. Gordon would hear this and he would do the right thing. I found him near the drinks table talking to 2 men I didn't recognize. He saw my face and excused himself. She sent Ren to sit outside, I said. In the garden. Told her she smelled like the kitchen. Gordon closed his eyes briefly. Michael. She's sitting on a bench outside with a gift she saved up for. Renee has a specific vision for the afternoon. Simone's talked to me about it, and you agreed to this? It's their event. I don't. Simone's family put a lot of work into this. Your niece is outside. He looked at his shoes. Good shoes, the kind he'd never have bought himself 3 years ago. It's 2 hours, he said. Then dinner, and Ren can be there for all of dinner. Something moved through me then. Not rage. Something colder. I went back through the room, past the catered canapes and the champagne flutes and the women who didn't know my name and didn't need to, out the side door. Ren was on the bench. She hadn't cried. That was the thing. She just looked tired. She'd put the gift bag down beside her feet and she was looking at the water. The Atlantic in November is a particular gray-green, heavy and flat. She'd been looking at it the way you look at something that doesn't look back. She heard me and turned. You didn't have to come out. I sat beside her. How long has this been going on? I asked. She shrugged one shoulder. Since the engagement party. Remember when I got put at the kids' table? I thought it was a mistake. Then at Easter, you weren't there, you were at Aunt Louise's. Simone introduced me to her sister as Gordon's niece who waitresses. Not nursing student, not Ren. Just the one who waitresses. Each word arrived quietly and landed hard. And her mom? Renee asked me once if I was going to finish school or just stay at the restaurant. She said it the same way she'd say is the salmon wild caught or farmed. Like the answer would determine whether to bother with me. I had not known any of this. Ren hadn't told me because she didn't want to be the reason I lost the only brother I had. I thought you and Gordon were doing better, she said. After Grandma passed. I didn't want to mess that up. I put my arm around her. She leaned into it the way she hadn't since she was 12. You know what gets me? She said after a while. I'm going to be a nurse. In 2 years I'm going to be the person Renee calls when she's scared and doesn't understand what the doctor just told her. And she'll want me to be calm and kind and patient, and I will be. Because that's the job. But right now I'm not good enough to sit at her brunch. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. Come inside with me, I said eventually. Dad, don't. We're going in. We're going to sit down and we're going to hold our heads up because there is nothing, not one single thing, that you need to be ashamed of. She looked at me. I don't want you to blow up your relationship with Gordon. That's not your responsibility to manage. She picked up the gift bag, straightened the ribbon. We went in through the side door. The room had filled. 30-something women in dry clean-only clothes circling the long table. Simone was at the center of it all in winter white, receiving compliments like she was expecting them. Gordon was against the far wall with a glass of sparkling water. Renee appeared at my elbow almost immediately. I see you decided to come back in, she said, looking at Ren with the particular expression of someone who is too well-bred to show actual displeasure. We're staying, I said. Of course, she smiled. Perhaps Ren would be more comfortable near the door. The main group is. She'll sit where she likes. The exchange was quiet enough that no one else heard it. But Simone had noticed us arrive. She crossed the room with a smile that didn't reach anything past her cheeks. Michael, Ren, you made it in. The emphasis on in was subtle enough to deny later. Beautiful event, I said. Ren brought you something. Ren held out the bag. Simone took it with practiced grace, glanced inside just enough to register the cashmere, said it with the other gifts. No thank you. Not even the performance of one. One of Simone's colleagues materialized. I learned later she was a regional director of something, and looked at Ren with the open assessment of someone who had never learned to hide it. And what do you do? She asked Ren. I'm in my 2nd year of nursing at Dal. Oh, the woman's attention had already begun to drift. And work? I work at the Marquette on weekends as a server. Right. She smiled vaguely and turned to ask Simone something about a hotel in Banff. I watched Ren's face. She kept it smooth. She'd had practice. Simone's mother passed by again and paused near us. Speaking to the regional director. Simone's done so well for herself, Renee said. Not quite to us and not quite not. We always said she'd marry someone established. It's lovely when that works out. Not everyone has the same trajectory, of course. A brief look at Ren. But that's life. The regional director laughed, and I put down my glass. The table was set along the center of the room, gifts arranged at one end. At the other, the catering team had set up a champagne display. 3 tiers of coupes, probably 60 glasses, the whole thing stacked with the kind of quiet confidence that says please admire this and also please do not touch. I pulled out the chair next to Ren and sat. My daughter is in her 2nd year of nursing, I said, to no one and everyone within a reasonable radius. The room didn't stop, but it tilted. A few heads turned. She works 20 hours a week at a restaurant to pay for her education without asking me for $1 more than I insist on giving her. She has never once called in sick when she wasn't. She studies pharmacology at a kitchen table that I built badly, and she has never complained about. She was accepted to Dalhousie's nursing program with a 3.9 average from a public high school in Cole Harbor. Simone was looking at me now. So was Gordon. Last month she stayed 3 extra hours after her shift because a regular customer's daughter called the restaurant looking for her mother, who had come in alone and seemed confused. Ren recognized the signs, stayed with the woman until the family arrived, and didn't mention it to me until 2 weeks later. "That's who she is, Michael," Gordon said quietly. A warning or an apology, I wasn't sure. "She was sent to sit outside in November because someone decided she smelled like work." I looked at Renee. "Your daughter is marrying my brother. That makes Ren family. If your social calculus doesn't have room for a nursing student who waits tables, that's a problem with the calculus." Renee had the look of someone who has never been addressed this way in her own home and was deciding how to remain composed. "I think perhaps you've misunderstood the afternoon," she started. "I haven't misunderstood anything." I stood up. "Ren, your gift is on the table. You've been gracious and kind, and you didn't have to be either." I looked at Gordon. My brother, who had held my daughter the day she was born, who had driven her to hockey and taught her to parallel park, who was now standing very still with a glass of sparkling water and not saying a word. "You've got a choice here," I said. "Same one you've had since Easter." Gordon looked at Ren, then at Simone, then at his shoes again. "Michael, this isn't the time, right?" I pushed my chair in. "Ren." We walked out together. The room stayed quiet behind us for long enough that I could hear our own footsteps. In the car, Ren didn't speak for a while. I didn't either. We took the coast road back toward the city because she always liked looking at the water when she needed to think. "That was probably the end of you and Gordon," she said finally. "That was Gordon's choice to make. I don't want to be the reason. You're not the reason. His choices are the reason. There's a difference." She looked out the window. "The thing about Renee saying I smelled like work," she said. "I've thought about that a lot since Easter. Like maybe I do. Maybe I go into rooms and people can tell I'm not from the same world they're from, and for a while that bothered me. Like maybe I should apologize for it somehow." She paused. "But I've been taking vitals on stroke patients at 4 in the morning on my clinical placement. I've held a man's hand while we waited for his family to get there. I've done that. And Simone's regional director friend has never done anything like that in her life. So I don't know what I'm supposed to be embarrassed about. I didn't trust myself to say anything useful, so I didn't say anything at all. Just drove." Gordon called that night. I let it go to voicemail. He called again the next morning, and I listened to that one. "I should have said something at Easter," he said in the message. "I know that. I want to talk if you'll let me." I didn't call back for 5 days. When I did, he told me that Simone had not been happy after we left. Her mother had been very unhappy. There had been a long, difficult conversation that evening about what he owed his family versus what he owed hers, and he said he had spent most of it being very quiet, which was its own kind of answer. He had gone back to Halifax to their apartment. He had, in the subsequent week, thought carefully about a number of things. "Ren's going to be a nurse," he said. "She's going to do something real." I got caught up in Simone's version of what mattered, and I stopped seeing clearly. "What are you doing about it?" A long pause. "We're in couples counseling. It was my condition for moving forward. Simone's agreed, but she's not happy about it. I don't know where it goes from here. I just know I should have stood up in that room. The person you need to talk to is Ren." "I know. Is she? Would she?" "I can't speak for her. Call her yourself." He did, the following Thursday, while she was between a class and a shift. She called me after and said it was a hard conversation, but that she'd listened. She told him the Easter incident, the engagement party table, the comment from his future mother-in-law about whether she'd stay at the restaurant. All of it. He'd heard it without defending himself, which she said was the first time she'd felt like he was actually present. She said she'd told him, "Show me something different, then we'll see." That spring, Ren finished her second year with a 3.8 average and started her consolidated clinical placement at the QE2 in Halifax. Gordon came to her pinning ceremony. He came alone. He sat 3 rows behind me, and he stood and clapped when her name was called, and afterward he took us both to dinner at a Portuguese place in the North End that Ren had been wanting to try. He told her over bacalhau and crusty bread that he'd ended things with Simone in February, that the counselor had asked them both what they most valued, and the list Simone produced had not included a single person's name. Not her mother's, not her friend's, not his. He said he'd thought about Ren on that garden bench for 3 months. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm not the one to tell you whether you made the right call," she said. "But I'm glad you're here." 2 years later, Ren is halfway through her 3rd year. She specializes in cardiac care. She still works one shift a week at the restaurant, less from necessity now than because she says it keeps her from forgetting what it's like to be on your feet all day with no one asking if you're okay. Her supervisor told me at a departmental event, not knowing who I was, that they had a student who had the best clinical instincts she'd seen in 20 years of teaching. She named Ren. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and held my coffee and felt it in my chest. Gordon comes for dinner every couple of months. He moved to a smaller apartment in Dartmouth after the breakup, closer to the water. He seems lighter. He and Ren have a running joke about something that happened in the counselor's waiting room that I've never been fully told, but they laugh about it every time. Last Thanksgiving after dinner, he pulled me aside while Ren was washing up. I think about that bench, he said. I'm going to think about that bench for the rest of my life. Good, I said. He laughed quietly and looked at his hands. Dad would have walked out with her immediately, he said. He wouldn't have gone inside at all. Probably. You gave me a chance to do better. I want you to know I understand that. I didn't have a clean answer for him. I'm not sure there's ever a clean answer when family comes back to you, after you'd started to let them go. You just make room. You don't forget, but you make room. Ren came in from the kitchen with leftover pie, and the three of us sat around the table until the candles burned low and the street outside got quiet. Just the three of us, which is what we've always been, more or less in different configurations across different years. She's the one I'm most proud of, not because of the grades or the placement or the commendations that are already starting to arrive in her second year of residency, because of who she is when no one is watching, because she sat on that bench in November and didn't crumble, didn't lash out, didn't ask me to fix it, because she already knew who she was and she was waiting for the rest of us to figure it out. Her mother knew too. I see it in Ren sometimes, that same settled certainty, like a bird that knows exactly which branch it wants and lands there cleanly, without second-guessing. Stand up for your kids, even when the room is full of people who've decided they already know the measure of your child, even when the cost is real and the silence afterward is long, because they are watching, and what they're watching is how you answer the question of whether they matter. Ren already knew she mattered. I just had to prove I knew it too.